there's something to be said about getting punched in the face as a kid. And we had taken a rocket and mortar attack, like literally minutes after we got off the airplane.
Gee. And this is your first time?
My very first time in Iraq, very first.
I have on the man, the myth, the legend. I love James. He's honestly dear to my heart. Um, he was a former retired U.S. Marine Corps officer, active duty of like 20 years. He does Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He actually has his black belt, and I'm just excited to have you on. I know this was going to be like a fun one. Yeah, just introduce yourself, James.
Hey, Owie, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on this. It's a real honor and a real pleasure. And I can't wait to have a conversation with you.
Right? It's going to be amazing. I think I wanted to start this one with just speaking about what got you into like joining the Marines.
So growing up, I was always interested in flying. My dad was a fighter pilot in the Navy. And I always just had a fascination with things that could fly, whether it was helicopters, jets, airliners, anything. And I also was brought up with a very strong sense of duty to my country. And so I always knew, even from as long as I can remember, that I wanted to be in the military. I didn't know what branch at the time. I was thinking, oh, Air Force, because they have all the airplanes, or so I thought as a young child. And as I got older, I realized that all the branches, every single branch is amazing in its own way. And I went for the Marine Corps because they didn't promise you a rose garden. They weren't promising me, this or that. They said, hey, it's going to be tough. If you've got what it takes, you can join us. If not, you can join one of the other branches. And I kind of like that challenge. And so the Marine Corps started calling to me, and I got really lucky. I actually got a Marine Corps full scholarship to my university. And so
is that afterwards or before you
this is when I was in high school. This is before I joined, right? I applied for the Marine NROTC scholarship. And that was pretty fun in itself, because unlike just applying for it, you had to do a physical fitness test, which was a 3-mile run, as many pull-ups as you could do, and then as many crunches as you could do in 2 minutes. And along with all the other stuff, your grades, your SAT scores, all that stuff. So it was pretty involved. And I like that, because the other branches were just, all right, what's your scores? What's your SATs? And I'm like, a physical, I want to be a physical kind of guy. And so I got lucky, and I got the scholarship. And then in May of 1992, I got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. I started off as an anti-air defense officer with Hawk and Stinger missile platoons. I was a platoon commander.
What does like an anti-defense officer mean? Like, what were you
So I was in charge of a platoon that would fall under a battalion that would be placed out in different areas to shoot down airplanes, enemy aircraft, in case of war, during wartime and things like that. Because I didn't get an aviation contract.
What is an aviation like? I'm unfamiliar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, some guys go in and they have what they call an aviation contract, aviation guarantee, meaning when they get their commission, they go straight to flight school.
Okay.
I didn't have one of those. I had to earn one of those. And then every Marine officer, when they get commissioned, goes through a 6-month course called the Basic School. And that's in Quantico, Virginia. And that's where, because the Marines have the philosophy, every Marine's a rifleman, first and foremost. And that's where you get to learn a whole bunch of really cool stuff. You get to learn how to call for fire. You get to learn how to shoot mortars and, infantry tactics and all kinds of but it's not just that, they're warrior scholars. So there's a lot of studying, we had to do a lot of reading, Sun Tzu, Nietzsche, all that kind of stuff to broaden and enlighten our journey, so to say.
I kind of like that you like said that you had to do a lot of reading, because when I think of the military, it's just all force and there's no like brain. Obviously you guys do use your brains and like tactics. You are very tactical, I'm
Do
assuming.
do you know
But
what the most dangerous weapon in the Marine Corps is?
no,
A Marine's mind. The Marine's mind. And that
well,
goes all the way from the basic PFC all the way up to your 5-star generals.
and like what were like exercises or things that they would do to just like enhance your mind? Was there like an exercise that like stands out or?
Well, there's, you had your reading lists. You had your reading list, like certain books per rank that you had to read that were required reading. So, and one of them was Killing Angels, which is about one of the Civil War battles. I think it was, if I remember correctly, I mean, this was 30 years ago, the Battle of Gettysburg, and it kind of walks you through as you progress in rank, from the stories to the tactics you're learning, what worked, what didn't work, the evolution of warfare basically, because our job is whether people like it or not, the military's job is to influence national policy, on that. When words stop working, then that's what the military does. We defend our country in war and so forth, and you've got to be smart. You can't be, so that is a myth that probably a lot of people have, that are just a bunch of knuckle draggers. But I'll tell you, some of the smartest people I know were Marines that I worked with daily. Absolutely brilliant minds.
You mentioned like having like a strong duty to your country, like you had a sense of duty to your country. Like, where do you think that was like instilled? Was it your parents, or like, where did that come from?
Well, obviously most of it probably from my parents, but I was born in 1970, and the 70s and 80s, we celebrated the centennial 1976, of our country, and we not that we were more patriotic then. I would definitely not say we were more patriotic, but as a kid, I felt it more back then. And my dad would take me to air shows, and I'd get to see the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds, the Air Force Thunderbirds, or get to see A-10 doing a low pass. And I'm like, man, I want to be.
Are these all like aircrafts and like planes?
Yeah, these are all military aircraft. Yeah,
Yeah, just like, are they doing like stunts and
yeah, they're doing
different
stunts, or
maneuvers?
yeah, or just doing like a high speed pass where they're 50 feet over the runway, in front of the center stand, with everybody in it, just booming on by, and it's just really impressive,
Do do they still like do stuff like that? I've
Oh
never.
yeah, absolutely. The Miramar Air Show every year. They have, I mean, it's like hundreds of thousands of people come to this thing, and they have like the Blue Angels, and they have a bunch of civilian, the Oracle team, just really high level aviation aerobatics and demonstrations. It's really cool. Yeah. So with COVID, I don't know. Obviously, I don't think they had
Yeah,
it last year because of the COVID crisis, but aside from that, yeah, every year that was the big highlight of our year, getting to take my kids to go see, and be a part of something I got to do when I was a kid. So,
for real. I
but
like speaking about like patriotism and like how it's changed. I remember, so I grew up in, I think you're familiar. I grew up in South Africa. My mom's like from LA. So when like even growing up in South Africa, I just like always resonated like with American culture and just like American people. Like I remember when I went to America for the first time, I got like this like big U.S. flag, brought it back to South Africa. Like I would always like have it all the time,
yeah,
and just like that kind of thing. It's crazy how it's just changed so much, like what the flag like means and just like what it means to be American, like now, like during these times. I feel like in a way people like just disrespected being American, and we don't like appreciate like what it is to be like American, and just like having that pride of who we are as like people and like as a nation. I think that's just been lost completely. Like, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, like it or not, we are one of the most accepting, we have more races, colors, creeds, the melting pot, send me
Yeah,
your weak, you're weary, and a lot of that gets highlighted when there are incidents and so forth. But as a whole, as the nation as a whole, I think that, yeah, we have our problems like everybody else, right? But as a whole, we really are just a melting pot of different people's personalities, cultures, and that's what makes us special. Um, the flag represents us as a whole. It doesn't represent who the president happens to be. It doesn't represent, it represents the people, us, and that's what makes that thing so special. I mean, I'd go back today and die for that flag and be wrapped in it in my funeral.
yeah.
That's how
Why?
much I love this country, and
Why would you like? How do you like feel that? Like, what? Like, how do you get that feeling to die for the
well,
country?
20 years of serving in the military for one, and getting to travel all over the world and seeing how people live in different countries. We have it good here in America. We have it good, really good in America. Do we have our homeless problems? Yes. Do we have hunger problems? Yes. But the scale that you see it in other countries makes what we have pale in comparison. And I'm not diminishing
the problems, yeah.
I'm not diminishing the problems, but I'm saying, having seen different cultures. I mean, why do you think so many people want to come to America legally or
It's
illegally?
true.
Because of what we represent, and if you work hard and
You
you
can make
put
it.
your time in, you can do whatever you want here.
Yeah, and I truly believe that. And it's happened within this year, like with just EQ training that we've
Hmm.
done and that we're like still continuously doing. It's all in your head at the end of the day. What's the strongest
Yeah.
weapon that we all have? Our mind.
Our
At
minds.
the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Right. If you tell yourself you can't do something, you'll never be able to do it.
Yeah.
But if you tell yourself, if you set an intention that you can do it, you're going to be able to do it. You may fail 100 times along the way, but as long as you keep that intention there, eventually you'll reach that goal.
Yeah.
You will, because
Keep
people will
going
come into your life that will help you along the way.
and just
That outward
inspire you.
focus.
Yeah, inspire you. And yeah, because you've honestly inspired me in just like so many ways, and just the way that you carry yourself, like with me, with other people, and just like how you stand for people, just in life in general. Like I see it, I fully
Oh,
see
thank
it.
you.
Just like by the way that you like reached out to me again, I feel like sometimes like I get caught up like in my own world where I'm like, oh, I gotta make it like on my journey and like make it to be successful. But at the end of the day, like even if I am successful, like I still want to have a whole bunch of people around me and have my closest relationships be strong. Because even
Absolutely.
if,
What good is having all the money, all the wealth, if you have nobody to share it with,
yeah,
right? You can be
you
lonely. You can be the richest guy in the world and lonely and not have any real relationships. Or you could be the pauper in the street that loves everybody and everybody loves them, you know?
for real. Can you go back into just like your background and your like culture and upbringing, like your parents?
I was raised, my father's white, my mother's Chinese. Um, I was raised with a lot of love. My parents did what they could for my sister and I. I was really fortunate. My mother's from Hawaii, and so everybody on her side of the family lived in Hawaii. My grandparents, my uncles, my aunties, and so I got to go to Hawaii every summer and be with family and just having a blast growing up as a Hapa, half white, half Chinese kid in Hawaii, which brought its own set of challenges. But
Is that what Hapa means?
yeah,
Have
Hapa is half.
okay.
Yeah. And you know, my happiest memories that I remember are all with my grandparents and my relatives and everybody in Hawaii. And I mean, as a 12 or 13-year-old, I wanted to go back so bad. My parents were like, well, you got to work. So I would cut all the neighbors' lawns. You know, back then, what, $5-10 a lawn, and I would save my money. And then, so they taught me a self of, if you want something, you got to go after it. And by not making me, by saying, well, if you want it, how you gonna raise the money for it? You know, and I got to be creative. I had a newspaper out to supplement that. And so when I got to go buy the ticket, there was that sense of, man,
Yeah.
I did this,
Yeah.
you know. And now I get to go see my grandparents and my favorite uncle, and I get to go do kung fu over there, and I get to go to the beach, and I mean, as a kid, that's paradise. It really was. So,
Where in Hawaii, like, were you staying? Were you in
so they were in Oahu. Oahu.
Oahu?
My grandparents' home where I stayed was in an area called Kaimuki, which is right near Diamond Head, right up on the hill near Diamond Head.
Okay.
And then even as I got older in high school, you know, I'd go back with my, you know, like my best friend from high school, and we would hike down from their house, you know, however many miles it was, down to the beach, go hang out, all that stuff, take the bus back, because going down was easy. It was a big hill, but going back up, we would take the bus back and just go exploring and everything. And unfortunately, you know, both my grandparents have passed away, but that place is still home. It's a home away from home, and I'll always love Hawaii. It'll always have a special place in my heart. So I like to identify as Hawaiian. I'm not. So
No,
yeah.
I just love like that. I feel like there's so much deep rooted culture in Hawaii, and I don't know. When I went for a basketball tournament. I went to
Mhm.
Maui. We were only there for like 6 7 days, but I thought it was amazing and just beautiful. But we were staying at a resort. I think it's always the best. I think one time we went like more inland, and we got to like see the people and just like interact with the people more. That's like always my best experience. Just like doing that. But I want to like touch on like you just like playing as a kid. I feel like kids like now, especially I have a little brother. He's like 12. I feel
Mhm.
like they have it so differently. They're like constantly on their phones. Like everything's dependent on like phones and TikTok.
Sure.
Maybe like my generation was like probably the last of just like going outside and like really exploring and like getting like rough and dirty like into it. Do you like what would you say? Because you also have kids.
Yeah, no, I would agree. You know, we didn't have cell phones when I was a kid. You know, we had the old rotary dial-up phones and stuff. And, you know, the agreement with the parents and your buddies were, be back for dinner. You know, they would tell you a time and you made sure you were back for dinner. You'd go back. Hey, can I go back out? Yeah, sure. Or no, you got to do homework, whatever it was. Yeah, we were always out and about, you know. Sometimes doing stupid things, sometimes doing fun things, you know. I mean, but we didn't have Xboxes or
Yeah.
PlayStations. We had you know, BB guns and things like that. And there's something to be said, because with the advent of the internet and social media, that led to cyberbullying and shaming and things like that, something we never had to deal with. When you had a problem with somebody back then, you either talked it out, worked it out that way, or you had physical conflict, physical resolution, you know. And there is something to be said about that,
Yeah.
you know, that there really is that conflict resolution in general. It's not running and hiding behind a keyboard. It's not calling somebody out behind their back. You know, if you have an issue with somebody, you should, in my opinion, in my experience, work it out face to face, because
Yeah.
sometimes things are lost in translation. But when you're speaking to somebody face to face, there's nothing lost.
Like,
right? You can see their facial expressions. You can see the tension or the de-escalation of tension or any of that stuff, you know?
yeah,
There's something to be said about getting punched in the face as a kid. I'm not advocating that by no means, but you learn from that.
I completely agree. Completely agree. I went to, I'm sure you can relate to this, like in, just like with the military in general, it's a brotherhood. And I went to this boarding school in South Africa. We would constantly just get into fights. People, there would be fights like every like week. There'd be something, and I don't know. It builds character. I think because you have to like stand up for yourself, and as you said, you just like squash it right there, like right there and then. I feel like now, like these days, especially when I moved here and I went to like high school here. So I did my senior year of high school in the States. I moved here and people were just like so soft, like so soft. I think the culture it's so soft, and if you say anything, it's just like this will happen, or I don't know. People
I'm offended. That makes me
exactly,
uncomfortable. That, there's no dialogue. It's either you offended somebody, there's no talking. There's no, you can have a difference of opinion, and both be right. You can both be right and have a completely opposite view of the same issue, right? What I've seen happen as of late, right, is one side believes something so strongly, the other side believes something so strongly, and they resort to name calling. So you never have a dialogue. You never have the interaction, because I tell you, I've learned a lot of things I wouldn't have learned about dealing with a best friend who may have a different idea than myself. I'm like, you know what? I never considered that. Huh, interesting. I don't agree with this, but that's okay. This part I never even considered, so let me think about that.
yeah. And even like being in the Marine Corps and like climbing each rank, I'm sure you got to like watch leaders and how like some leaders behaved and how you didn't gravitate towards. So I'm sure you had leaders that were above you.
Oh
That
yeah,
you,
yeah. You learn just as much from a bad leader as you do from a good leader, and you take what the good leaders do and you try to emulate that, and you learn what the bad leaders
yeah,
do, and you disregard that. You put that out of your tool chest.
yeah.
And a lot of that is learning. You learn. You make mistakes. You learn from those mistakes, and you move on.
How would you say? What kind of leader would you say you are?
I I was brought up to my very first platoon sergeant gave me some really good advice that I took heed and I listened to, and it served me throughout my 20 years in the Marine Corps. He said, if you take care of your men, they will always take care of you. And so I lived and died by that. You know, does that mean everything was perfect? No, sometimes they'd screw up, but my job as the officer was take the butt chewing from higher, protect them, because I'm responsible for what happens or fails to happen, in my little kingdom, my little platoon or my squadron or whatever it may be, right? Does that mean shit rolls downhill? Absolutely. Yeah. Why did you do that? I just got my butt chewed because of something stupid you did. So how can we fix this? Right. And you look at, something I learned on the EQ, right? It's not right, wrong. It's what's working, what's not working,
Yeah,
what is my course correction, right? It takes all the emotion out of it. It takes
yeah,
all the emotion out of it. Just look at things. If you look at things in life, like what's working, what's not working, there's no judgment there.
yeah,
It's whatever you're doing is either working or it's not working. If it's not working, what do I need to do to course correct to get it to work?
yeah. And I think it's like looking at it from just like an objective standpoint, like not putting people in the situations. I think if you look at any type of situation, regardless of the people, most 80% of the people know the right answer of like whether something was right or wrong that happened, regardless of the people. Like if you're taking people out of the equation and you're just looking at the situation, you know the right answer. Like how did your leadership change from being in the Marine Corps to like real world like situations.
That's funny you asked that, right? So, um, jokingly, I'm like, well, that hammer didn't work. I better get a bigger hammer, right? That was that was my thought. That obviously doesn't serve everybody well. Some people, some people need the hammer. I'm one of those guys, right? If you just, okay, James, we got to do better, I'm going to blow that off, right? But you come at me with a hammer, I'm going to pay attention. Be like, oh yeah, okay, let's get this done. But what the EQ training did for me was it helped me find other tools to find out what people respond to, because some is a kind word, some is the hammer, some are in between, some are giving them all the rope they need to just go run, some are taking that rope away so they don't hang themselves. I mean, it's a very different, everybody's different, everybody responds differently. I am a very result oriented kind of person. Is a very result oriented kind of guy in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is very result oriented. It's all about the objective area, right? Everything else doesn't matter, but what happens in the objective area. And I was brought up, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, And so as long as however I'm doing things to get action on target, to get to that objective area works, it's all good.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other branches, it's like, you got to get permission for each step of the way. You have to get to the objective area this way. Whereas the Marine Corps, they're like, we don't care how you get there. Just make sure you're there at this time, at this place, and, get whatever it is done. So, and that's a help and a hindrance, right? Being result oriented and being motivated like that, because when you fall short, it can really hurt. It can really hurt. You're like, man, I was so close, but I just missed it, or whatever it may be. And on the flip side, getting to check little boxes off and say, hey, man, I got all this stuff knocked off my list today. That feels really good, So it's a two-edged sword. But that's the sword I live by. Does that make sense? I don't know if that.
It does. It does. I think it's like being just kind-hearted, like being kind-hearted and just considering everyone's like feelings along the way. That's also something I like have trouble with, because I'm like, if we can get to this result and I know it works, like why does it matter like what you feel? And
Yeah.
like the EQ training has taught me so much of like bringing along everyone and like hurting along everyone in the journey. And I think it's also taught me that I think everyone can be a leader and everyone leads in different ways, but not everyone wants to be a leader, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to drag people along with me to the finish line. And one of my biggest learnings was sometimes you have to just walk alongside them, because then if you're dragging them, they miss out on their journey.
Yeah.
Because you're dragging them along.
Yeah. Even just like deciding what kind of people you want in your life, because we met all different types of people.
Yeah.
I'm just like so appreciative just for meeting you, because I think we spoke about it before. If we met each other like in an everyday scenario, we probably would not be friends. Like if you came to a bar that I was at, I'd be like, who's this like old fart at the bar?
Oh, look that old. Come on now.
I'm joking.
I know.
Yeah. But it just brought us like so close together, and just all the different types of personalities and just blending them. Jeez, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And the ripple effect we create, it moves on, because I take what I learn, you take what you learn, we take what we as a collective learn, and we pass it on, and we see that ripple effect coursing on, and that is how we unite the world.
I agree. Like everyone matters. You have to come with that mentality. Like
Yeah.
individual like person matters at the end of the day to create change. But it's also like that change has to start with like saving yourself. That's a huge like learning lesson that I like learned along the way. It's like yeah, you can't save others unless you've saved yourself. Because I think also they're not going to be inspired by you if you're not leading by
Example.
like action, an example. Yeah,
Yeah, you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you can help others,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
I truly believe in that. Going back to the Marine Corps, after you like served 20 years, how was that feeling? Like, what got you to keep going after like year 15?
Oh, that's easy, man. The people I was with, the leaders I got to work for, the fellow officers I got to work with, be around. I mean, it's a real brotherhood.
Yeah,
It's a brotherhood. It's the best damn gun club in the world, you know. Does it have its crappy moments? Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. But when everybody's equally suffering, I mean, we'd be in, for example, Korea in the wintertime,
yeah.
minus 20 degrees, 30 degrees outside. I mean, just absolutely miserable, right? And we would all just start laughing for no reason. Like here we are all shivering around a little pot stove, and it's just like, what are we doing? and
Yeah.
then and then you remember the brothers that have gone before you, the chosen reservoir. Those guys didn't have a stove or a heater to keep them warm as they were walking, being walked. I mean, as a Marine, you never want to dishonor the legacy of those that came before you.
Mm.
You always want to uphold the highest traditions, and the highest service. And that's why, being a Marine means something, being called a Marine. And that's why you never lose that title. Once a Marine, always a Marine. It's a
Yeah,
title earned. It's earned. It's not just given.
it's not given. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
So,
through some of the training that you had to like do to get into the Marine Corps. Was it grueling? Did you
well,
feel
they had,
like,
so you go. There's a couple ways to become an officer in the Marine Corps. I'll talk about my experience. So
yeah,
I go through. I think it was between my junior and senior year that summer. I went off to a place called OCS, Officer Candidate School, and that is like the equivalent of officer boot camp.
okay,
Uh, right. So you have the, you've seen in the movies, the drill instructors yelling at you in each year and stuff. And well, as officers, we learn to lead from the front. Right. And that's another lesson you'd asked earlier. I would never make any Marine do anything I wasn't willing to do myself.
mm,
And when I say that, yeah, absolutely, there are different skill sets. Like, I couldn't walk up and disarm an IED, but I had Marines that I had to go send out there to go disarm those. But they were EOD guys, explosive ordnance guys. They knew how to do that, but I would go out with them and say, all right, what sector do you want me to cover? So that somebody couldn't come up with the phone and blow the IED or, come shoot at them. We would protect them as they're walking up. So yeah, obviously I would never walk up an IED because I have no idea what I'm doing, but I would never ask somebody to do something I wasn't willing to do. So I would still be out there with them. But I digress. So going back at officer candidate school, it's the typical, everybody's yelling at you, nothing's fast enough. It, once again, shared misery creates bonding, creates
yeah.
good times, creates stories, but there were a lot of cool things we got to do, out there. The endurance course, that was fun. It's a long run with your boots on, your camis, you're holding your rifle and you got your other stuff on. And I don't know, it was 9 miles or something like that. And you're going over
Jeez,
obstacles and you have to make it in a certain time. If you don't make the time, you fail.
you failed. Yeah.
Yeah. The funnest thing was they call it the Tarzan course, which is a high ropes course. So
Yeah.
you're way up in the trees, climbing cargo nets, swinging on things, and when you look down, you're like, dude, if I fall, I'm gonna get hurt. I don't see
Yeah.
anything down there, you know. But it was really cool, you know, because it teaches you to face your fears. And back to our original conversation, you know, if your intention is to make it through, you're gonna make it through, you know, and not let those fears override your brain and say, nope, you can't do this.
You have moments like where you felt like I'm not gonna handle, like I can't handle this right now, or I'm gonna quit.
Never quit. No. I will say the first time I went to Iraq, when we arrived, we had just gotten off the plane and we were at the base that we were going to be at. This is in Iraq, in country. And we had taken a rocket and mortar attack, like literally minutes after we got off the airplane.
Jeez. And this is your first time?
My very first time in Iraq, very first time being there, first time being in war, all of that stuff.
Jeez.
And one of those rounds hit the ammunition dump. So that starts setting all that stuff off. And that was probably the first time that I was like,
what's an ammunition?
Where they hold all the stuff that, you know, all the bullets, all the bombs and things like that, right? Because you got to protect those. You got to make sure that they're it just happened to, that one round happened to hit in the right place at the right time. So now all that stuff's going off for a day, you know, so all you hear are these explosions, you know. I'm like, ooh, it's going to be a tough deployment, you know, and I questioned myself for a few minutes. Like, well, I guess this is what I signed up for. And what brought me back was, I don't want to let my Marines down.
Say it again.
I do not want to let my Marines down. You know, I'm in charge of them and we're going to get through this together.
Jeez. Yeah, I can't even imagine just that feeling of like being there. But did you feel like you knew everything you signed up for before you signed the dotted line and that like process?
Oh no, you never know. I mean, that's just like anything. You buy a brand new car, do you know everything about that brand new car? No. You may know a lot about it. You may have studied, you may have read, but every car is its own individual, you know, piece of metal, just like you'll never know everything about anything. You can only prepare. I mean, you'd be foolish not to prepare, but there's only so much reading you can do. You have to experience it.
That's true. That's true. Even like getting outside before you went, did you speak to former officers?
Oh yeah. I talked to officers, friends of my family, you know, my dad, and you know, I talked to all of them. And they just smiled because they knew it was coming in a good way, in a good way, you know, and they're the ones that set my foundation, you know, take care of your men. They'll take care of you, you know, as officers, you know, and it may not just be the Marine Corps, but, you know, we always let our men eat first, you know, make sure that they're taken care of, period.
I love that. Yeah. So the team comes before you.
Absolutely.
Always.
Yes.
Jeez. So after you went through the Marine Corps, 20 years, retired, back home, how did you feel? Like, what was that feeling? Did you struggle?
When I first retired, man, I was like, whoo, I'm glad now. I don't have anybody tell me where I got to go, what I got to do, you know. But as the months started going by, I realized I started missing the camaraderie, the playfulness, you know, we're brutal to each other joke wise. I mean, you want to talk about practical jokes and things like that, you know, we live for that kind of stuff, you know, and I realized you don't get that kind of camaraderie. Let me say, in my experience, you don't get that kind of camaraderie in everyday jobs, you know, that I had in the military, that kind of brotherhood. But it's out there. It is out there. It's what you make of it, right? If it's not there, you create it.
You create it for yourself.
Yeah. So I did find myself, because the longer you get away from your retirement, the more you forget about the bad times and you just remember all the good times.
That's
right.
True. That's true. That is like so true. I think I try to like live by that. Any like bad experiences, I still remember if I like really push and look for it, but there's just so many people and situations that are like brought up, and I'm like, oh no, that was definitely a good time. But it's only if I like I've been journaling a lot, and when I look back on those times, I'm like, another thing is I've been doing like voice memos, and like
Hmm.
listening to yourself in voice memos is insane because the mentality of just like what you're going through and like what matters in that moment just changes so much, and you realize like emotions are gonna change. They're just a wave, and you just have to like ride that wave and just like
Hmm.
be neutral to it. That's what, yeah, listening to voice memos and just like listening to yourself like 5 years ago or 2 years. So like literally, I made this 2021 goals video on my channel. Me listening to that video again just humbled me so much because it showed me how unprepared in my life I was, just like in so many areas. And it's just like how it showed up is the results that I produced, and like not being sure of exactly what I was saying and like what direction I wanted to go in. It just made me be lost like in my direction, and like having that structure and like goals, concrete goals is so important, so important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Would you say you learned that like from your parents or just life in general?
Well, yeah. I mean, my parents are the foundation of everything. Um,
Mhm.
you know, and yeah, all my experiences add to that. My time growing up, my time in the military, my time, getting married, having kids, it all adds to that experience and keeps going. Yeah.
Would you what would you say is your biggest like passion like now, like every like after you retired, what's been your biggest passion?
Um, jujitsu.
Yeah.
I started jujitsu when I was 37, and I was still in the Marine Corps. It was something my son and I decided to do as a daddy son thing. So they had a kids class, and then the adult class followed right after that. And so for my kids, it's we don't care what you do. You got to do some kind of sport. You get to pick it. It doesn't matter if you want to play basketball, we're going to sign you up for basketball. You want to play soccer, you want to do fencing, wrestling, it doesn't matter, right? But you got to pick something. And if it's a team sport, you're going to stay with it for the duration of the season. And then at the end of the season, you can decide if you want to stay, continue, or choose something else. If
Yeah.
it's an individual sport, something like jujitsu or wrestling or something like that, then you got to give it a minimum of 3 months to see if it's really something you like, because you may hate it the first month, right? And then the second month, go, okay, this isn't too bad. And by the third month, you'll really know if you really like it or don't like it. Yeah. And so, I went in with our son Kai, and that was the expectation. Hey, we'll give it a try. We'll see. We'll try it for a few months. We like it. We'll stay. Well, I haven't stopped. It's been I've never stopped doing it. Yeah. And for me, it's a great stress relief. It teaches how to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because you get put in some very uncomfortable situations, while doing jujitsu, practicing jujitsu. And when you get comfortable being uncomfortable, it makes everything else in life seem so much easier, so much, like, why am I stressing that? Uh, and once again, the camaraderie, it's another sense of family. So it's kind of close to that Marine Corps thing, where, because you're sweating and bleeding, and with your brothers and sisters in the gym, at the doing jujitsu, and you really get close to everybody. It's another family. It becomes another extension of your family. And so that kind of brought, kept it in line with what I had experienced in the Marine Corps. And so, I love doing jujitsu. I love hanging out with the people that do jujitsu, that kind of stuff.
Even just the discipline in just martial arts as a whole is insane. Because I did taekwondo when I was 4 up until like 10, and I remember each time coming onto the mat, you bow, um, little things like that, and I forgot the word for it, but just like your sensei basically,
Mhm.
greeting them, um,
Yeah, it
all those
teaches
like little
respect.
things. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
it
the
teaches
respect that's
respect,
instilled, the integrity.
discipline.
yeah, the discipline, and you're just like daily like practicing that all the time with jujitsu. I think it's something I want to get into for sure. You convinced me with the other conversations we had.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, one of the biggest things you mentioned is like you can go all the way and not hurt anyone
Yeah.
necessarily. Obviously, there's like anomalies that happen, but
Yeah, but you get to actually see if what you're learning works in a real dynamic situation with somebody resisting you at 50%, 70%, 100%, right? You go, well, that worked or that didn't work. And why didn't it work? Okay, I need to adjust this, this, and this, you know, whereas, you know, in some of the striking arts, I can't strike you in the face because I'm going to cause damage, you know, immediate damage, right? Whereas jujitsu, I can put you in a choke and you can tap before you go to sleep, or you can work or fight your way out of that and see what, you know, so you're doing choke escapes, you know, did that technique work, or did I go to sleep, or did I have to tap? You know, it's something you get to do against a live resisting opponent.
yeah. Has there been like multiple times where you've been like choked out, where you passed out for a second and you came back?
I'll tell you right now, they're lying. Everybody's lying if they said they've never been choked out or passed out or, you know, tapped out. Everybody does it. Everybody who's been in it longer than a year or two will have tapped out at least 100 times.
And speaking about tapping out, I can't believe I didn't message you after this fight. I know you definitely watched it. The Alexander Volkanovski and the Brian Ortega fight. Or Brandon Ortega. Yeah.
Yeah, what Brian Ortega. Yeah,
Brian Ortega.
man, Volkanovski, he's a champion.
Actually,
We thought he was.
before you get into it, I want to like give the audience some context. Basically, I think Brian Ortega is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, crazy at jiu-jitsu, like phenomenal at just takedowns and submission attempts. Gets Alexander Volkanovski in this headlock. James will explain it better, but basically, yeah, explain it. Because I don't know all the like nitty gritty.
He had him in a guillotine choke,
Yeah.
you know, a really tight one. There were, I mean, he got out of that, put him in a triangle, got out of that. That was the heart of a champion. The rest of us mere mortals, we'd either tapped out or gone to sleep. I'm not even kidding. And, you know, just his pure willpower, just his pure, no, I'm not going to succumb to this.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and that's no disrespect to Mr. Ortega, because man, what he could not have called any. I mean, what a great. Absolutely. Props to both you guys. If you guys listen to this podcast.
Yeah. And it was crazy because I think I watched like an interview of like how he said how he got past it and like what he was thinking in those moments. He was like, I'm not losing. Like I'm not there's no way I'm losing. And he said there was points where he was like gargling for breath, and his like head was just like red. I'll put a video so everyone can see. But just yeah, as you said, I can't think of a situation where I've been in where I've had to like deal with that. And I think if people had to deal with those types of situations in their lives, it would create another form of endurance in your mental, because you know you've been through that and you have some sort of base that you're standing on. Because I feel like everyone thinks that they can fight. Everyone thinks that they're a good fighter. There's a certain thing if this happens or that happens, but you're testing yourself.
Yeah. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Then that plan changes. And now, based on your training, how are you going to function? How are you going to function with that? Yeah, those guys are out of this world. Out of this world. Phenomenal.
Yeah. Absolutely. I wanted to speak to you about. You're good.
Sorry about that.
You're good. I wanted to speak to you about just your foundation that you created officially, I think, end of like last year, December.
March, yeah, and then we got we in April, May, June, we got the official, from the federal and state.
Yeah. Kimonos for Kai. Just go into like what got you to do that, and like what's your vision for your foundation?
So in 2014, we lost our son Kai. Kai was the one I mentioned earlier that I started my jiu-jitsu journey with. Kai was a phenom. Once he started jiu-jitsu at the end of his first 3 months, we're like, so Kai, do you want to keep doing this, or do you want to try something? No, Dad, I want to do this. From day one, he absolutely loved the grappling arts. He loved jiu-jitsu, and he was good. He won the Pan Americans, he won nationals, he won worlds, he won Grapplers X,
Yeah.
and just his way of being. He was so humble in victory and so kind in defeat. There was no showboating when he won. When he lost, yeah, it hit him hard, right? But he showed all the respect in the world to the victor, and he'd be the kid in the gym that when a new kid would show up, he'd be like, "Hey, I'm Kai. Let me
Yeah.
put his arm around him, bring him on in, and kind of help the kid get adjusted, learn who all the other kids were, learn the exercises, and then like be the kid's partner for the first few weeks or whatever it was, and he was the same way in school. If there was a new kid that showed up, he'd be the first one to be like, "Hey, I'm Kai. What's your name? Come on, join us over here. We're having lunch," whatever it may be. He was just that kid. And he was brilliant. He was doing like calculus at the age of 12 because we were homeschooling at the time, and he was really good in math, right? So he ran with it. When mom and dad have to get out old, like Google, how do I do calculus, to help him with his homework,
Yeah.
he was the captain of the Rubik's Cube team. He could solve a Rubik's Cube with his eyes closed on a skateboard upside down. He was just that kind of kid, right? And a joy to be around. Everybody loved Kai. So Kai lost his life on October 9th, 2014. So actually next week will be the 7-year anniversary of his passing. And after he passed, his memorial service, we thought we'd have, a few hundred people come. It closed out the church. There were people waiting outside that could not get into the church to his memorial service because he affected that many lives at the age of 12. And I wanted to do something to honor his legacy and keep his name alive. I didn't want him to die a second death, which is you died a physical death. And then when people no longer say your name, you die your second death. And I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to honor him, his good works, by helping other families and other teens and preteens. So we created KIMONOS for Kai. And for many years, it was just that. It was just a website, right? And always wanted to do more, but I told myself stories that, well, I'm an airline pilot. I'm on the road a lot. I go, if I can't devote the time needed to make this right, then I don't want to do it at all. So that was a story I kept telling myself. So I kept putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. Well, until we did their EQ training. And there I was like, you know what? What am I waiting for? I'll do the best that I can with the tools that I have. And if we save one life, it's all worth it.
Yeah.
Because one life is the same as saving 1,000 lives, 1,000,000 lives, because that one life means something to somebody. It means something to the world. That's the light the world will no longer have. And so we started KIMONOS for Kai. We just finally became a not-for-profit, a 501c3. And the message is you are not replaceable. And we have these bands that we like to pass out that say just that. I don't know if you can see that, but
Yeah, you can.
you're not replaceable, and there's always someone to talk to. So initially, when we started creating this, we thought, oh man, we're going to reach the teens, the preteens, the 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, the teenagers. And we realized that wasn't necessarily the audience that we needed to reach. So we reevaluated, we relooked at our mission, our vision, what do we really want from this? And came to the conclusion that it's the parents, it's the teachers, it's the coaches, it's the mentors, it's the aunts, the uncles. We have to give them the tools to be able to help intervene, look at the signs, and let those kids that they're in daily contact with, let them know that they're not replaceable. And how do you do that, right? Through open dialogue, genuine open dialogue. So we created talking points, like how to have a conversation, put your phone down,
Yeah.
just have a talk with your child. Let them know. Don't assume your child knows you love them. You may think they do. Tell them, hey, today I just want you to know, I really do love you. I appreciate you. I am so glad you're in my life. I am so glad you are my child, or I am so glad that you're one of my students, or I am so glad that you're on my team because I appreciate you. A lot of times, and I was guilty of this too, we assume our kids know that we love them.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to change that. We're trying to empower adult mentors, parents, relatives to have these conversations. And we do that through these talking points, and we have resources, a resource page. And I don't know if you can post, but www.kimonosforkai.org. Yeah.
I'll put the link and everything there.
Oh, perfect.
Down.
Yeah. And you can actually download all the talking points. You can download the talking points, and they've all been reviewed by psychologists, reviewed by therapists. And so they've all been vetted. Let's put it that way. They've all
Yeah.
been vetted. It's not going to create more problems than what's already there. Um, a lot of times I hear when I do my speaking engagements, well, I don't want to plant the suggestion of suicide in their mind by asking them, have you considered suicide? You're not planting anything in their minds. They've either considered it or they haven't. And if they haven't, they're like, what are you talking about? No, I don't want to kill myself. Or if they have contemplated it, now they know you care because you're asking them about it. You're getting them help. You're going to get them the help that they need because of that. And so our foundation, although we're in our baby stages and we're just beginning, we're looking forward. We're going to have our first event December 4th. And what that's going to allow us to do is raise money that we can get these talking points printed out and able to be distributed to, the police departments, the schools, the different jiu-jitsu gyms, boxing gyms around our area, and eventually around the country, and then around the world. That's our big goal, to get these out there worldwide, not just here in San Diego, not just here in Southern California, not just in California, not just in the United States, but worldwide. The other focus is getting counseling for families that have lost a child through suicide, because they don't know where to turn to. I know that when we lost our child, you're in free fall. You have just no idea of anything. And it's just so, it's unlike any pain that we'd ever experienced before. And we didn't know where to turn. If I can offer support to another lost family, then that's what we're going to do. And we're going to raise funds. We have some psychologists and psychiatrists that are going to be willing to donate time to talk with lost parents, after the loss of their child. And we also want to give back to the community, through the foster kids program, because right now the foster care program, they have one of the highest suicide rates right now, foster kids, because they don't feel their value, their worth, right? Their own parents, gave them up or lost them going to jail or whatever. And it's really tough because some of these kids are shuttled from home to home to home, and they have no real sense of belonging. They have no real sense that somebody cares for them. And we want to change that. Kimonos for Kai wants to let them know that they too are not replaceable, and that there's always someone to talk to, um, and so that's the genesis of this entire Kimonos for Kai. And we're having our first fundraiser event December 4th up in Burbank, and it's going to be for anybody. We're going to have some UFC fighters that are going to be making guest appearances and doing some teaching. We've got we've got some people that teach world-class athletes about breath holding and breath breathing, and we even have several world champion, about a woman that's going to be teaching some women's self-defense. So, I mean, there's something for everybody, even if you're not into the sport, even if you're not into, fighting or jujitsu or any of that stuff. Just being able to support us in what we're trying to do, and I'll give you all the details, as we get them. We're still working everything out. We're still
Yeah.
getting it going, but we do know it's going to be December 4th. It's going to be up in Burbank, and
And
it's going to be amazing.
I'll put all those links just so everyone can go to it. Because I know, yeah, from the bottom of my heart, you're genuinely one of the most like present people that I know. And yeah, I can tell you want to make a difference for others out there. And
Absolutely. And you know what, if they can't make it, say they're in New York and obviously aren't going to be able to make it, if they want to donate too, we are a not-for-profit uh
yeah,
charity. They can send a check, and they'll get the tax exemption for that and all that kind of stuff. So we have all that set up, and help us make a difference in a child's life. Help us save a child's life.
yeah. I think I wanted to end it off on just like what's been one of your biggest learnings this year in doing everything, just everything, and like really think about it because I want a good answer. It can be multiple things.
Sure.
Doesn't have to be, yeah.
So in 2021, what is my biggest learning?
Yeah.
My biggest learning in 2021 is, and let me preface this a little bit. After the loss of our child in 2014, became very inward focused. I was afraid to let anybody in. I was afraid to let anybody get close again for fear of losing them, like we lost our son. So I was very inward focused. So what I learned in my journey so far, and especially applying it this year, is outward focused. I've learned that when I give, I get back 100-fold. So if I give joy, positivity, energy, then that comes back. It's reflected right back at me 100-fold. Just like if I give negativity, um, dourness or whatever, then that's also reflected back. And I found that being outward focused by trying to help others navigate a horrible situation that my family went through, that gives us purpose, being able to help someone else. And we do deal with lost parents, people that have lost a child. My wife and I are dealing with two of them right now, and we've been there, which sucks. We've lost our own child, but being able to help support somebody that's going through the beginnings of this, it they in turn will then pass that on if God forbid that happens to someone else that they know. And
How do you even begin? Where do you even begin? I know that's
no, you know how you begin? I listen.
yeah.
I let them talk. I I let them share. The first question I ask is, tell me about your child. Tell me about your son. Tell me about your daughter. And just listen to them talk about their kid that they just lost. And sometimes that's all it is. That'll be them talking for an hour about their child and not saying a word. Because people have a misconception that when you lose a child, bringing up that child's name is going to bring you back into this horrible sadness. And it's absolutely the opposite. When you speak my son's name, it tells me that he's still living inside you. And that actually makes me happy. That's my experience. I'm not saying that's everybody's experience, but when you allow somebody to talk about it, whether it's a child, whether it's a mom or a dad, tell me about your mom, tell me about your dad, tell me about your sister, tell me about your brother, and they get to brag on their kid, they walk away feeling loved. They walk away feeling listened to, and what that does is it invites questions at that point because they know you're sincere. They know that you care. And
Yeah.
then they ask you, well, how did you get through X, Y, or Z? And then you can offer whatever support that you have. Don't be afraid to say their name and their presence. Do not be afraid. It's sad when you don't. It's sad when you don't. So looping back to your original question, it's outward focused. It's being there for others and supporting them as if your life depended on it. Because you know what? Your life does depend on it, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah, we impact everyone, whether it's how we greet them. I think we don't realize that like each little interaction matters. Whether it's like someone you meet at the grocery store, just in passing, like that. I believe in like the ripple and the cascading, like and domino effect of each interaction matters because there's different pathways that you'll go on how you react. And yeah, thank you for that answer. I think it's insightful, just like how you carry yourself, and I can attest to that. You've shown up for me, and like I experience you like doing that for other people like all the time.
Thank you so much. Hey, can I put a challenge out to your listeners?
For sure, yeah.
All right, cool. I want to challenge everybody listening here that if they don't know the name of the checkout person that they always, at whatever grocery store they go to, learn their name, ask them how they're doing. And then when you go back, you remember their name and you call them by their name, or the gas station that you always go to, or your favorite Starbucks that you go. Learn one person's name and make their day by remembering it the next time you go in and asking them how they're doing.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Thinking outside yourself, it'll
Yeah.
help. Thank you, like for everyone listening. Thank you, James, for being on again.
Oh, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it. I'm glad I got to have this with you. This has been amazing.
Yeah,
This has been
it's these
fun.
moments I think that I'll remember forever, and it's just like cemented on the internet forever. And I don't know, I just love that, and I love what you're doing. I love the change you're creating, and I just want to say to you, keep going because I know it's not easy. Everyone like thinks being positive and like being like the way that you're being is easy. It's not. There's moments where I know you feel like, oh, screw that person or like screw that thing. You keep going, and I just want to commend you for that. Thanks for being on again, James.
Oh, thank you, Owe. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, brother.
See you.